مشاهدي الآن أهلا وسهلا فيكم بحلقة استثنائية من صوت التغيير. اليوم ضيفنا ناشط مميز بالدياسبورا اللبنانية، عضو الهيئة الإدارية بلبنانيز سويس أسوشيشن، فورست بارتوvi. فورست معنا رح يكون عم نحاورك باللغة الأجنبية، باللغة الإنجليزية، لأنه ما بيعرف عربي فورست إلا شوي مثل ما بيقول، لأنه هو أصلا من لبناني. فورست ويلكم.
Yes, hello,
Hello.
Diana, and thank you for your introduction, and thank you for having me on your media show. I'm honored and delighted to be here today.
It's my pleasure too.
So, whatever questions you have,
Yes.
I am ready and willing to answer them.
Thank you, Forrest. First of all, we need you to tell us about yourself. You're raised in Lebanon. You speak Arabic way, as we said, and the most important thing, tell us why you feel like you are involved with the Lebanese issue. We can see you that you are fighting with the Lebanese people. Why?
Diana, the answer is pretty simple. My stepfather was Lebanese. I was raised and I grew up in Lebanon until the tender age of 20 when I left to study abroad. So I went through the good times in Lebanon, and I was there when the civil war started. And my stepfather was a man I truly respected, and a Lebanese that stood up for law and justice. And he taught me that they have some of the Lebanese are the most wonderful people in the world fighting for law and justice. And so I've always been in touch with Lebanon. My mother's still living there. She's an old woman, but she is still there. My sister's living there. And I have an emotional connection. My heart is connected to Lebanon. I am L.E.N. And this is why I have been waiting ever since 1975 for a new Lebanon. One that is based on justice, equality, law. It has never come. I'm growing older, and I want to be there to witness a new Lebanon before I die.
You believe
that's it.
You believe that you will see new Lebanon. I hope you have many more years to live.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. You believe that Lebanon will be better?
I think if the right conditions are met and the right people come into power and do the right things, yes, I think it is possible. I think even a miracle could be possible, but it's tough. It's very tough. As long as we have criminals in power, the chances are very small.
Yes. Forrest, you are with us today to speak about the initiatives you are launched in the Lebanese Swiss Association. What are the most important initiatives you are working on today?
I think one of the most important initiatives is our initiative or our action with the Swiss Federal Council. As you know, when the Thawra started in 2019, billions of dollars were transferred over to Switzerland. And as a result of that, the Lebanese Swiss Association, together with other organizations, launched an appeal to the Swiss Federal Council to freeze and possibly confiscate the monies of politically exposed persons. As such, we sent an appeal and we told them, please confiscate this money under the FIAA law. They responded, we can't do this, but we're not giving up. We want to have the Federal Council freeze those assets and restitute those assets to the victims of aggression by the Lebanese state.
Yes.
That's the most important thing.
Yes.
Another thing is, I mean, we truly believe that Lebanon is guilty of serious crimes, of international crimes. And we would like to hold those accountable under international under universal law. They have committed crimes against humanity, and we need to pursue that. We cannot have the people go away without facing justice.
طيب, where did you reach with those initiatives? Why didn't we see any of them achieved till now?
Yes. Well, Diana, I think the biggest obstacle is that Lebanon and all of the world does not want to acknowledge that millions of victims of crimes exist. If there is no crime committed, there are no victims, and Lebanon and the international community has no obligation to protect, to remedy, and to restitute. So this is a big issue. And Switzerland, of course, if it moves ahead and acknowledges that, wow, billions are parked here, and we have, that means there's a big crime that's been committed, and they have huge obligations and responsibilities, and they just don't want to do that. And no other country in the world wants to do that. Not France.
What's preventing them from doing that?
Well, you need to understand, it upsets the whole status quo. The whole political status quo, the whole games that they're playing would have to be stopped. All the people that they're doing business with would, or many of them would be criminals. And they would have to stop talking with them. They would have to, follow them in courts of law. And that's a big thing. It's easier, Diana, to write off the victims as a loss. And that includes the IMF. That is treating the Lebanese victims as numbers, and they are not fulfilling their obligation. So yes, it's easier this way. The victims can't talk. This is the solution, in your opinion? I think yes.
Or do you have anything else to do?
Well, I think first of all, we need to legally recognize that they're crimes. And as a result, victims exist, and the international community has a responsibility to protect, repair, and restitute these victims. So that's what we're trying to do with the Swiss. We're asking them, please recognize there are big, huge crimes being committed here. You need to pursue these. So that is really, in my understanding, the basic foundation of getting justice. Because if we don't have victims, like you're a victim, you're a number. Then the haircuts here, there, it doesn't matter. We have no victims.
Yes.
This is what we're pushing for.
Yes, and your initiatives need the signature of the Lebanese parliament members. Okay, do you think that those people will incriminate themselves and sign?
Well, I think they have a moral and they have a legal obligation under Lebanese and international laws to pursue the perpetrators of these crimes. When I speak of, and this is important, everybody will know, when I speak of the Lebanese state, its government and its institutions, I don't mean each and every one person. I mean, I collectively give the name Lebanese government to this, So you may have some people that are wonderful, they are fighting, but they can still say the Lebanese government is guilty of crimes. And that doesn't mean that they are guilty, they are heroes. So yes, I would expect them, they must, if they are acting under law and justice, they must acknowledge that victims exist. And Diana, if we look at the special rapporteur for extreme poverty and human rights, Olivier Deschutes, he visited Lebanon a few months ago.
Yes.
He came up with a report, and in his report, he says, yes, beyond doubt, the Lebanese government, its institutions are guilty of grave human rights violations. And that it's even worse that in the recovery plan, there is no mention of getting the looted money back or restituting the depositors their money. This is the UN rapporteur for extreme poverty and human rights. If the Lebanese parliament does not acknowledge this, then they themselves are facilitating crimes.
Yes. So how can those initiatives would help the Lebanese people if they are completed? What results you will get, in your
Well,
opinion?
then we could pursue the people responsible in courts of law in Lebanon or overseas. You know, it's possible to have a court in maybe in Finland or somewhere else. And we can also, there are some laws that we don't know about that are not spoken about in Lebanon, like things like non-conviction based asset recovery, which means some countries have a law that says you don't need a conviction to confiscate the money from what we believe are illicit, proceeds, and restitute them to the victims. So we can act on several fronts. There are many laws, many ways, but the problem is coming together and forming such a project. It's nearly impossible. So
yes,
yeah.
What are the upcoming initiatives you will work on, or you will wait to?
Yes. Well, number one is we're proceeding with the Swiss Federal Council. Yes. We'd like to put pressure on them and tell them enough is enough. They have been hiding behind technicalities. Oh, we can't do this because of Article 4.2. Then we tell them, well, use Article 4.3 or use the non-conviction-based asset recovery. Just take the money. So there are many ways to do this, but it takes a lot of time. And we have to wait months before we get a response. Not only that, Diana, but if we look at something called the United Nations Guiding Principles on Human Rights in Businesses. Yes. It's basically a document that says every business has the obligation under international and human rights laws to meet human rights standards, which means if a Swiss bank does business with a Lebanese bank, and that Lebanese bank is in violation of human rights, the Swiss bank has an obligation to repair, restitute, and remedy that situation. And so, because it can't be, it's a big human rights violations if a few people transfer their money and millions have no access. Yes. This is a huge human rights violations and has caused the country to go into the worst financial crisis, since 1850. So we need to approach these businesses, and we're trying to with the Swiss banks and telling them you are doing business, and it's you're doing business with banks that are violating human rights. So you are facilitating this. You're making it easy for them by accepting the money. Stop.
Yes.
You can't under international law. And the Swiss government has a plan for this. And so there's a lot we can do, not only in Switzerland, but across the world.
Yes. Lebanese people today need people like you who are working and fighting with them. Today, what would you send the Lebanese people a message, and what would you tell them?
I'm telling the Lebanese people is we still have hope, but we need to stick together, which is possibly the hardest thing for Lebanese, is to come together. And we need to make tough decisions. You see, in my understanding, I grew up in Lebanon. I visited it. There is a sort of a collective collaboration. Many Lebanese accepted a situation with corruption because many of them, it helped them. Lashu, the Lubnani, Lebanon, we do it this way.
The Lebanese people give up?
Yes, they've given up, yes. And there is hope. We can do it. We need to stick together, and we need to, our hope is the new parliament. We need to have parliament really push into doing the right decisions. And everyone, and stick together, form a group, form a huge project, which is tough. Have maybe 1,000 people. I would love to see everyone in Lebanon sign a declaration that we send to Olivier de Schutter, who has a special procedure and for reporting human rights violations. And he can even then, if he needs be, take these countries to court. So I would like for him to address all of the Lebanese and to tell them, sign here. We need your name, because if we get 100,000 signatures, it will be a powerful tool to crush the criminals.
Yes, you mentioned the new parliament. How do you see the new Lebanese parliament today? Are you satisfied with the results of the election?
I think it's a good start. It's broken the status quo. But of course, there's a lot more that needs to be done, and a lot more radical things, you know. I mean, look at this. The people that are responsible for the crisis are still in power. You know, the special committees for parliament. It's all these people that have very dubious connections. We need to stop this, and we need to have brave people that come with us or anyone else, go to the United Nations, launch a complaint, so that, you know, it's like in the case of, let's go back to Rafik Hariri, the special tribunal for Lebanon. The Speaker of the House in those days, he did not convene Parliament. He did not assemble Parliament to pass a law to have this special tribunal. So what did they do? Parliament, the majority, wrote with the then Prime Minister to the United Nations, and then they submitted it to the Security Council, and the Security Council says, you will have a special tribunal. So we need to make steps like this. We need to maybe even push the Security Council to say this. If the Lebanese Parliament cannot decide because it's not being convened, we will ask the Security Council.
Yes, and hope to find a good result for what you are working on.
Exactly. And like I said, the first thing is to categorize the Lebanese as victims, officially, legally. You are victims. You need to be protected. You need to be restituted.
Unfortunately.
You know, but no one is saying it yet. The IMF, it's okay, these are numbers, we'll do a haircut, everything looks good. Khalas, stop it. And this is the first step, victims.
Yes, Forrest, I want to thank you because you shared us this episode of L.E.N. And thanks for sharing the Lebanese people, their issues and their life, which is not good for them all. Thank you very much.
أنا معكم. Thank you for having me on board.
And it was a pleasure to meet you today. Thank you.
me more. نحن من الأكثر. Whatever it is. All right. Take care.
مشاهدينا شكرا لمتابعتكم وإلى اللقاء كمان بحلقات جديدة. باي باي.